Hello, everybody. Welcome back to my YouTube storytelling channel. This is Hua. I hope that you are well and enjoying this beautiful weather that we are having. This is the last day of August. I cannot even believe it. It feels like it was just yesterday when we celebrated the new year. I hope that you are all getting ready for the holidays. I'm so excited to decorate the house and bring out the Christmas decorations. It's never too early. Well, I hope that you are excited to hear chapter 2 of The Bodyguard and the Courtesan. So sit back, relax, and enjoy. Maisie stood at the front entrance, waiting for Delana as she prepared to leave the banquet for the night. She was exhausted. Her feet hurt and she was hungry. The food had been too spicy for her taste, so she ate very little. She wanted to go home, wash up, and crawl into bed to sleep. Delana was taking her sweet time in bidding goodbye, and she felt the fatigue creep onto her. Lord Lyon, the old man who had expressed a good interest in her services tonight, came walking toward her with a grin on his face. Maisie, how about you join me for a nightcap? He asked. She forced a smile that she knew did not reach her eyes. My lord, I am beyond exhausted. Perhaps another night. Nonsense! I will not take no for an answer. Where's your master? He asked, looking for Delana, and when his eyes fell on her, he walked over. But she reached out to stop him. My lord, I promise you a nightcap, and more on another evening. He tapped her hand with a smile. It will be tonight, and if you disagree with me, I shall bring it up with your master that you are refusing a client. Is that something wise? Before she could argue further, Waylon joined them and put a hand on Lord Lyon's arm, gaining his attention. My lord, your wife is looking for you. She awaits you at the east entrance impatiently. Lord Lyon's face drained of color, and he smiled nervously. Ah, Waylon, thank you. She sighed and turned around to her. Perhaps another evening. When he walked off, Maisie shut her eyes and let out a breath of relief. Where is Delana? Waylon asked. Maisie rubbed her temples and gestured with a nod of her head toward the direction where the woman was talking. She looked up at him with tired eyes. If she does not hurry, I will leave without her. I feel as if I am ready to faint. Then faint in my arms and I shall call her over. Before she had a chance to act in front of the public, Delana strolled over with a smile and eyed Waylon. Lord Waylon, interesting to find you here with our Maisie. Come along, dear. Let us return home. Good evening, Lord Waylon, Maisie said as she turned and followed Delana out. The carriage bounced along the gravel road as it took Maisie and Delana home. The driver was quiet, and the moon was high outside the window curtain. Delana took off her gloves and massaged her hands as she looked up at Maisie with a glare she knew all too well. Why did you refuse Lord Lyon? Maisie dropped her gaze to her hands. I was overtly exhausted, Delana. I felt as if I was ready to faint on my feet. Then go faint at his feet. You denying him will not only get him angry, but you even had Waylon come save you. She shot her gaze at her. I did not call for Waylon, Delana. The man simply came on his own. Delana leaned forward and smiled. He has his eyes watching you like a hawk, my dear girl. He will come to your rescue at any time. You need to make it known that he cannot do that in public. The society men will soon get a whiff of it and report it to the king that his royal bodyguard is protecting a brothel princess. Maisie made a face. I loathe that name. I am not a brothel princess. What else shall I call you? My dear girl, if he loves you enough, he shall buy your freedom so you can walk beside him without fear. But can you imagine if he does? The many men will speak of him in public, for they know what you look like beneath those fancy clothes. Remember that when you want to switch over to being welcomed in society, women like you and I will never be treated the same if our freedom is given to us. Maisie felt her eyes water with tears. You are telling me to endure my life and pretend that everything is magical? Delena reached out to touch her hand. No, my dear girl, I am telling you that the right man for you is not Waylon. When your eyes catch a royal man, the only title he can give you is a concubine and no more. You will fight for knights to be shared from his wife. It is no different than your life as a courtesan. But at least as a concubine, I can choose to sleep next to one man for an eternity.
I woke up in the middle of the night.
Waylon cleared the exit for the elderly couple as Prime Minister Douglas Yang made his way toward him wearing all black, and beside his arm was his daughter Samara. She was smiling at him, her brown eyes bright and cheery as she adjusted her pink dress. The woman was easy on the eyes, but nothing catchy enough for men. She barely had an offer to dance tonight. Lord Waylon, Douglas said as he smiled at him, have you met my daughter? Waylon bowed and smiled as he took her hand and kissed the knuckles lightly. I have not. This is Samara, he said. Dear, be a help and gather my cloak from the servants. Samara smiled shyly and replied, Yes, father. Lord Waylon, Douglas continued, you are past the age to take a wife. I shall speak to the king to select a woman for you. What do you think of my Samara? I rather think she will shine brightly next to your arm. Waylon's heart dropped. Prime Minister, you are much too kind. Your daughter would be too beautiful for me. He waved a hand. Nonsense, my lord. Samara returned and handed the cloak to him. Samara, have Lord Waylon walk you out. I shall have a word with the king. Waylon felt the heat rise to his cheeks as the woman looked at him with a seductive stare. She simply extended her hand to him, and he took it to place around his arm. They walked out into the evening air, and she tightened her hand around him. My lord, have you a woman? She asked. Smiling, he replied, Does a man not have several? She slapped his arm playfully. You jest. A man like you looks to be of the faithful kind. I do not believe for a second that you have several. Might I inquire how one shall become yours? She was quite bold. Why would you inquire? She stopped walking and pulled him to look at her. Why, for myself, of course. I am of marrying age, and I have seen 20 winters. That is an old spinster by law already, but I promise you that I can birth children and will love the man who becomes my husband. Not only that, I come with a hefty dowry. The woman was actually marketing herself as a wife to him. Waylon wanted to laugh as he removed her hand from his arm and stepped away, putting a safe distance between them. Lady Samara, you are quite bold indeed. Many men will admire that. Samara's eyes darkened. But not you? I prefer my woman quiet. She smiled. One day, my lord, you and I shall have more than a quiet moment. She turned and found her father making his way toward them. Ah, my father arrives. Thank you, my lord, for walking me. I believe you and I shall speak again soon.
When the time is right and I'm not alone, I will conquer this and bring you home. When this world has stopped and the breeze is up, when the time is right, I'll sing you a song.
The brothel doors started closing when Waylon made his way to the entrance. He ran to where the two guards had their hands on the knob and slipped his sword to stop them. They looked at him, and the shorter one stepped forward. I apologize, Lord Waylon, but Lady Maisie is not accepting visitors this evening. Waylon smiled and moved closer to them. She will accept me. The two guards exchanged looks, and then Delana appeared from the door and gestured him in. He walked past the guards and up to where she stood, still in the same snazzy dress as from the banquet. She is resting, Delana said. I must ask you to leave. Waylon frowned and looked to the window where her chamber was, and indeed the lights were out. Is she all right? She is well, my lord, but she turned down a customer because of you. She was beyond exhausted, Delana. Why would you allow her to bring someone back to entertain when she was ready to faint? Delana smiled and crossed her arms. It is her job, Waylon. I thought you protected your girls. What I see you doing is working them to death to earn money for your keep. She dropped her arms and stepped forward, her eyes darkening. Be careful, my lord, or else I shall ban you. I only tolerate you because my dear Maisie's heart is lost to you. If it weren't for her, I would have you reported to the king. Now leave. She is not taking anyone, and as you said, she is beyond exhausted. Waylon let out a breath and turned to go as the two guards once again exchanged glances. When he made it out the door, however, the king's carriage pulled up, and he stepped out of the view. The servant put out the stepping stairs, and the king stepped out with a dark cloak around him. The servant knocked, and the two guards opened. The king is here, his servant said. Welcome, your majesty. As the king entered, the servant left with the carriage, and Waylon wondered who he was there to see. His heart broke as he hoped it was not who he thought it was. Kaiden dropped the last cabbage roll onto the cart and began pushing it toward the entrance of the brothel. He was excited today because he was going to take Maisie for a stroll on his farm. He had asked Delana, and she had agreed to let them go. Once he entered, he handed the cart over to the servant in charge of the kitchen and waited as she emptied it. Once he had a carriage carrying the produce sent back home, he went in search of her and found her mending a dress in the outside court where the fountain was. She looked a bit pale, and it worried him as he spoke her name. She looked up and smiled as she set down her dress and stood up. Kaiden, what brings you here? She asked. He walked to her and took her hands, inspecting her. Are you well? The smile on her face faded and the light dimmed in her eyes. I am well. Why does it seem like you are hiding something from me? She smiled and replied, Of course not, Kaiden. What brings you here? He touched her nose and smiled. You, of course. I have Delana's permission to bring you to my farm. Go put on something comfortable and I shall take you out. She squealed and rushed off. Kaiden smiled and picked up the dress she was mending and folded it neatly. He would send this to a seamstress to fix.
Take me on a spree. I wanna get to know me, every little inch of me. Gentle while you stroke, will you picture me?
The farm was on the edge of town where the cherry blossom trees grew and bloomed in the spring. Kaiden had made a wall of bamboo sticks all around the 4-acre land and even built a well with his own 2 hands. Maisie walked ahead of him, and he felt his heart expand with love. He wanted nothing more than to have this become a reality for him. He longed to wake up and have her walk upon this land with him, just like this. It is a beautiful day, Maisie said as she turned around to him. I have not felt this much peace for a long time. Then come stay with me, Maisie. This place is your home as much as it is mine. Laughing, she replied, Your parents would not approve me as your wife. I do not require anyone's approval when it comes to the woman I love. Her smile faded and she looked away. You cannot love me, Kaiden. I am tainted in many destructive ways. You are much of a good man. He walked to her and took her hands, tilting her chin up to look at him. Her eyes showed him the pain she was in, and he wanted to erase it from her. It guts me to see how much pain you are in. She smiled bleakly and shrugged her thin shoulders. It is my life. Then let me buy you out of it. I would do it at a drop of a hat if you allow me to. She looked up at him. You should save that money for the woman who is better than me. There is none better than you, Maisie. Do you not understand my heart's wishes? It is to have you here with me, just like this, every single morning. Perhaps I have not been loud enough in my desires for you, but this is my greatest wish. Maisie smiled and touched his face, her eyes welling up with tears. You do not want me as a wife, Kaiden. I am not pure. You deserve someone better than me. She turned to go, but he reached out and grabbed her, pulling her close to him. He tilted her chin up and kissed her, his fingers grabbing a hold of her hair. The desire circled in the lower pit of his belly, and when he pulled away, he saw her lips trembling. I apologize. I could not contain myself, he whispered. It is all right, Kaiden. He sighed and pulled her into his arms. What can I say to make you change your mind? She reached around him to hold his waist. Give me some time, Kaiden. I shall have an answer for you soon. When Maisie returned to her chambers, who would be sitting in there waiting for her but Waylon? The look on his face told her he was impatient. She set the basket of fabrics down on the table and reached out to pick up the brooches when he took her hand, pulling her toward him. Where were you? He asked. She removed her hand from his hold and stepped away. Why are you here? Why do you question my presence? Am I not welcomed? Turning toward him, Maisie smiled and replied, That is not what I meant. You rarely come see me this way. I was merely questioning your intentions. I actually came to check on you last evening, but Delena denied me entrance. But I later saw the king arrive. Was he your special guest? Maisie narrowed her eyes and crossed her arms. Do you realize where you are standing, my lord? This here is a brothel where customers come to seek pleasure and sometimes confidence. Whether he was my guest or not is of no concern of yours. I do not tell the world when you spend the night. He came to her and grabbed her, pulling her into his arms, leaning down against her face. Why must you taunt me? I am trying to help you get out of this place, but it seems to me like you enjoy being here. Enjoy? My lord, have you gone mad? I am not welcomed in society, whether I am at your arms or the king's. This is the only place I can be safe. In Kaiden's? Delaney said you were with him today. Why can you openly walk with him and not with me? Maisie smiled and removed herself from his arms. Kaiden and I walk the same life. He is but a poor farmer's son. His hands know nothing but the land and the earth. His season of life never changes, and he can take care of me without the world turning an eye to peek. Are you in love with him? Waylon asked with a deep, jealous tone. If you are, I will kill him. Laughing, Maisie replied, You think, just because you bear the cloak of the kings, you can take away any life you wish? Between you and Kaiden, I would rather choose him, for life with him would leave me unjudged. You think his parents would accept you? They do not need to. As he said, he does not require anyone's approval when it comes to the woman he loves. Waylon's eyes darkened. And I do. Maisie smiled and reached out to touch his cheek. My lord, the entire world watches who you will select as your bride. You know the king would deny us if we were to be together. Only he is allowed to select your bride. I fear he may not choose me. What makes you say that? She smiled and removed her hand. Because he has sought my company at night. His arms have held me up until dawn, and his lips have caressed me. If he were to choose to keep me to fill his need or give to you, he would much rather keep me for himself. Waylon shook his head, his eyes brimming with anger and jealousy. Each word that reeks out of your mouth is of how you do not wish to be with me. Is it true, then? Do you not wish to be known as mine? Maisie gave him a sad smile. The life I lead? I cannot be yours. I belong to anyone who walks through that door. Thank you, everybody, for joining in with Chapter 2. Chapter 3 will be out shortly.
Take me on a spree. I wanna get to know me.